Hi, I'm just gonna, oh my God, that voice. Um, hello, I'm just hitting record because I don't want to think about it later. Um, and this is my social experiment for how little preparation, stress, editing, or planning I am willing or able to tolerate before hitting publish on something. And so I also want my guests to be aware that that's part of the experiment. So if it's like really like, I didn't know that, then I'm doing it now so we can cut this part out.
Nope, I'll just breathe really quietly.
That's funny. No, it's fine. I think because this is new. I did one yesterday and I just published it. I didn't even replay it.
Nice.
Right. And you're a musician.
Mm-hmm.
Do you improv? Do you do improv? Yeah. Right?
Yep.
That's what I thought. We're talking to, and I want to make sure I say it right. Mattia or Mattia? Mattia. Mm-hmm. with a hard t. Mm-hmm. Mattia and a emphasis on the I.
Mm-hmm. And my last name is Mauree.
Mauree. Mattia Mauree and I are speaking for the first time ever. We've been fan personing each other in our business coaching group with Simone Sol, who's whoop whoop, very amazing, very awesome, highly recommend, could not recommend enough. And I'm meeting all the most interesting people these days in general, there and otherwise in life. Artists, slutty queers, people with rainbow curtains in the background. So so it's nice to have you. I have done no prep. I literally came out of the bath 5 minutes ago. I'm in my plush, old, red, ratty monk's bathrobe, like holes in the armpit. Yeah.
Love it.
No makeup, no hair. This is just bath hair.
I'm wearing, I will show you my shirt that says "Blow me" with a little dandelion.
This is amazing. Oh my God, what a good shirt. I don't generally, there's not many shirts with writing that I can like easily appreciate. But "Blow me with a dandelion" is excellent.
Yeah, I have also found that, so I'm non-binary, but I also call myself a trans guy sometimes. And tiny trans guys can get away with anything. We're like, everybody's like, "Oh, you're so cute," like totally non-threatening. So I find I can say and wear some pretty outrageous things, and people are fine with it.
What is the most outrageous thing you have worn?
Oh, that's a good question.
I do
have a sheer leotard with velvet flamingos on it.
Are the flamingos pink? What color is the leotard?
The whole thing. Yeah, it's all pink and sheer, and then the velvet is on top of that.
Like a Bjork kind of like I'm thinking like swans, like full 3D
it's not
swans.
Huge. No, it's 2D. Yeah.
It's 2D, a 2D velvet leotard with swans. No, flamingos. And it's pink, you said? You did not say that. Did you say that?
So am I. I'm very pink.
Very pink. I have surprising amounts of pink. I'm very surprised by it. Shocking pink. What kind of pink is your pink?
Well, that's probably the only really pink thing that I have at the moment. Yeah, and it's peachy okay. Pink.
I'm into it. That's great. I don't know if this was one of the things you grew up with, but the idea that, the way you dress is frivolous or superficial, or there's something ignoble about caring about it or enjoying it, even, I think, right? Vain. Something. There's lots of what was your...
Well, I was also raised in evangelical purity culture. So there was also a whole modesty component
Oh, right. There's, yes,
Yeah.
yeah, same. Growing up in India, this was there for sure. I remember now, I had like, I think it was my 16th birthday or maybe my 18th birthday, I forget. It was like a big birthday. And we had like a combined birthday party with like four other people who were turning the same age, and the families got together, and like we rented a small, like a boat on the dock, like you could take a little cruise kind of thing, and they had a bar and some music and whatever. For 18-year-old kids. Apparently this is normal in India. Growing up. I don't know if there was a bar, maybe there wasn't. This is a strange thing to think about. But anyway, so I had a dress for it, and over there it's very common to get dresses made, like, or anything made. Tailored stuff was actually easier to get than manufactured clothing. Um, and people did it from their homes, and they had like a special person who was there, like their favorite tailor. And I had this gown in mind that I saw in a magazine or something. It had this, the back was like all the way down to the base of the spine, like just above the butt crack, like very sexy, very sexy. And the front it was like a lace thing and a long gown, but with a slit and this like crazy back. And I remember just wanting that. And then, well, but my parent who took me, it's like, it's a little too low. So the tailor's kind of copying the design from the magazine and saying over here, nope, higher, nope, higher, higher. And it ended up like halfway up my shoulder blades.
Your shoulder blades are too sexy. You can't see those.
Right. So it's like, it's basically here. I'm like in a tube now. Which was fine. It was fine, but it was like definitely a modesty thing. It was already enough that there were straps on this and my arms were showing, and
Oh yeah.
So what was it? What was it like? What did you have to wear growing up? Since we have a fashion theme going here in
Well,
your culture.
interestingly enough, also being autistic and not being diagnosed until my 30s, as a kid, I really didn't care about clothes very much. So I actually just kind of let my mom dress me until I was like 13. I pretty much just, as long as it was comfortable. So like there were things I
Mhm,
wouldn't wear, there were textures I wouldn't wear.
mhm.
But other than that, I was just kind of like, oh, you gave me this kind of frumpy dress. Okay, whatever. And didn't mind. And I just kind of I had a lot of clothes that were too big as well, because I had a lot of hand-me-downs and, stuff from older cousins. And yeah, a lot of clothes that in retrospect were pretty terrible. I think the one outfit that was very striking was somebody gave us a bunch of dresses in different sizes. I also have 6 younger siblings. So there's a picture of all of us, and we look like we're wearing like dresses that were modified from burlap sacks. They are true. They were probably linen or something, but they're like taupe or like brownish, and they just look awful. It's a great picture of me and all my siblings just looking like
That
we're wearing
sounds, yeah.
like fancy orphanage wear, like
This is great.
which is also great because we were also obsessed with being orphans, like to the point that my parents should have been worried. We were all very,
Collectively,
very
all of you were into this, like
the
as
the
6 of
oldest,
you.
like the oldest, probably 4 of us, like up until I don't know, when I was probably 10, and because we're also the oldest 6 of us were born in 8 years, so we're very close in age as well. So yeah, we read books about orphans, we played orphan. Um,
It's so good.
yeah, and we were really into wearing rags, like literal rags from my grandma's farm, that we would take
You
and
just
like
wrap them around
tie
your body.
tie around ourselves. And my mom was like, "You cannot be seen like this. This is, we would like want to go out like this." And she's like, you can't go. You have rags tied around you. You can't go play orphan at the grocery store."
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Was this on top of like
No,
clothes or just
no,
the rags?
just rags.
Just the rags. This is priceless. I am enjoying this conversation thoroughly. This is great. What fun.
I don't know if I've ever like talked to someone outside of the family about that. That's like a memory I'd kind of forgotten that we just had. We just love tying rags on. Yeah. Classic.
Wow. And all this while you're autistic, but no idea. Nobody knows. You don't know. How
Yeah,
can
I
you
mean, I was
know? This is my
yeah, I was
question,
born
lady.
in the
Like, how do you
80s.
know?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
in in the 80s and 90s, there was one very stereotypical image of what an autistic kid seemed like. And to be fair, there were some things captured on family video where I look back and I'm like, how did nobody know? I'm literally like in a cardboard box rocking back and forth. And when someone tries to talk to me, I start screaming at them. Like I'm having a, what to me now, and especially having friends with autistic kids, things that now we look at and we're like, oh, that's so obvious. But at the time, I was verbal, like I was speaking, and that was one of the things they looked for was non-speaking. So that was yeah, nobody noticed. But in retrospect, pretty obvious. As I'm like, as I've told family members, they're just like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that explains a lot.
Wow. Is this okay that we talk about this?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so what happened? Like I'm always curious about, I'm obsessed with like stories of origin. I love origin
Hmm.
stories, and I like to see how far back anything can go with. I do a lot of insight work, and it's the same thing. I just want to trace a thought back to its like root, its essence, its seed, its kernel, and from there the understanding kind of unfolds. I think of it as like psychedelically, like in all directions very quickly. So this is kind of the basis right now of the work that I aspire to do, that I'm doing, but like being able to articulate it at this level, um, and see what kind of people are interested in this level of conversation and even get what I'm saying. Because this is happening through music, and I'm curious if this happens to you. And I'm curious about a lot of things, but your music journey and your personal journey and mental health and being in the world and coaching, like so many things, so many things. But I'm curious what the inciting incident or revelatory moment was for you around your autism.
Yeah, well, I would say one of the big things was staying home a bunch during the pandemic and having, like, at the very beginning, I'd already kind of been thinking about it, or kind of, heard some stuff that I was thinking about. But when I had my anxiety go down by like 90% because I wasn't taking the train every day,
Mhm.
I was just like, oh, I didn't realize it was possible for that to go away. I thought that was just sort of a factor of my brain. And knowing that it was more environmental really got me thinking. And then actually, my therapist that I had at that time for several years had an autistic kid. And there were a number of things that I said where she'd be like, oh, yeah, my kid does that, or something, So we'd kind of already started having this conversation a little bit. And then actually, and this, I kind of have to go back a little bit, which is that I actually had a bipolar diagnosis when I was 20, which is a very common misdiagnosis for non-men with autism. Um, Very, very common. So
This is
that
fascinating.
and borderline, those are the two most common misdiagnoses of autism in non-men. And so I had actually been medicated for a decade for that, which I'm not even upset about, because it's like it also runs in my family. So there's actually good reason for them to think that that might be it. But basically, I hadn't been depressed in I don't know, 5 or 6 years at that point. Now it's been almost 8 years, which, by the way, is because I went no contact with my parents and I just haven't been depressed since. Another environmental factor. And so basically, my therapist was like, the diagnosis that's in your chart that you sort of gathered at this point is not a real thing, because it was rapid cycling, bipolar 1 in full remission, because I was having zero symptoms for years. And she was like, bipolar 1 doesn't go into remission, rapid cycling doesn't go into remission. And this just doesn't make sense. Like, let's look at what's happening.
Mhm.
Um, and basically, I mean, starting with that conversation, and I had a psychiatrist at the time as well, really just started to go, oh, I guess the best way to test whether I actually have this is to go off my medication, which I did, and nothing happened.
Good.
So
How many
Yeah. So
years were you
10
taking
years.
it?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think 7 of those years was a low dose of lithium. And I had gone on a higher dose a couple times because basically what they're looking for is a certain concentration in your blood. And so they kept wanting me to take my dose up, and I kept saying, I'm not having symptoms. I'd really just rather stay on the low dose. So I was just on a weirdly low dose that my psychiatrist wasn't happy about, but I was just being pushy. And I was like, I'm not willing to take a higher dose and have side effects when I'm fine and I'm not having any symptoms at all. So anyway, then I was like, okay, so if it's not bipolar, then what is it? And actually got official autism testing, got the official diagnosis. So yeah, it was kind of a long journey in that sense, but the actual kind of like, oh, is this a real thing? So taking some action was actually very quick. It's just that nobody had that conversation with me, or sort of, taken a look at my chart and said, this looks weird. So I'm very grateful to that therapist who was a licensed clinical social worker for putting the pieces together and being like, hey buddy, you wanna talk about this?
That's amazing. I have to say, it is very rare to find a good diagnostician. I have a lot of feelings. I have done a lot of all kinds of weird diagnoses on things that have been going on or being treated differently for years. And I'm saying across the field, like with a pet, with like
Right.
a family members, like the itch that wouldn't go away, and all the doctors put this cream and that powder. And I'm like, wait a sec, it's kind of an obvious thing to me.
40%
And
of diagnoses are incorrect on average.
I have this, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. I've been self-diagnosing like crazy. I'm a doctor's worst nightmare. I don't go much anymore. And I want to be able to go, but I don't. I mean, every time I go, I'm like, I'm getting not just mediocre information, but it's like, it's wrong. Like, it's wrong. I can feel, I'm open to it, but I was like, I've been through these theories already, and I know why they don't fit. And here's an idea. I'll come with ideas. I diagnosed myself on a number of things in the last 1 year. I think I've figured out my neurodivergence. Past couple of years. Yeah, pandemic was a lot of that insight. Just like I was sitting alone in a room, like a lot. So did my own bipolar 2 diagnosis, checked with a therapist. Like, well, you check all the things, but I'm not worried. And ADHD more recently, I don't identify with any of it. Here's the thing. It makes sense, but I don't identify in the pathological framework.
Right. Yeah. The pathological part of it, that's what diagnosis is about, right? Is this a problem for you? And in order to get a diagnosis, pretty much anything, it has to, especially in psychiatry, it has to be a problem. So you can have a lot of, and I think of, autism, ADHD, other things as a neurotype and not as a disease, right? So this is the way my brain is formed. Sure, it could be partly from trauma, could be partly from these other things that might have affected brain growth or development or whatever, but however it happened, I now have this brain, and this is a fundamental part of who I am. And I, identify with and associate with that to a large degree, and appreciate having, in my case, the official diagnosis, mostly because one of the things I do is I coach neurodivergent people. So it's useful for me to have gone through that process if people have questions about it, but also to just like know for sure. And at the same time, I think self-diagnosis is 100% valid. I am all for it. I'm all for people finding out what works for them, and, not approaching it from as pathological a standpoint. I don't think the goal, at least for me and the people that I work with, the goal is not to, medicate your natural brain state into oblivion to the point where you seem neurotypical. It's to appreciate the brain that you have, because there are also upsides for a lot of people. There are good things that come along with it as well.
Yeah. No, I love it. I'm falling in love with myself and the way I'm designed. And meeting more and more people who get that. It's like the experience from the inside for me feels like a rainforest mind. Is how
I love that.
I've heard it. There's a book actually. There's Paula Probert, I don't know how to say her last name. And she wrote a book called The Rainforest Mind, which is where I started reading a lot about intensity. Like there's do you know Dabrowski's work? Kazimierz Dabrowski was a Polish psychotherapist, I think, from in the 60s or 70s. It came over to the US and formed this whole theory of intensities, like emotional intensity and sensory and physical, like people with, talk fast or move a lot or have a lot of physical energy, right? So there's like 5 checklists over there. And I just dinged red on all of them,
Yes.
on the test. And then I learned about high sensitivity, like check. And then I learned about neurodivergence and this idea of, many people have different concepts. There's, what's her name? Barbara Sher, refused to choose from the 80s or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I read that a little bit and was like some insight into like different kinds of plants and flowers and trees in this whole ecosystem, the rainforest mind, right? So it's whatever the conditions, right? Whatever the kernel, and then whatever the conditions over time, as it unfolds and interacts with its environment, is how I experience myself in relation to other people or other entities in the world or natural elements in the world. That we're all kind of in this, like we're embedded in the same kind of fluid cosmic mud. And everything is just kind of always unfolding and growing and moving and changing. And so from that point of view, there's nothing wrong with anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, one of the most interesting experiences, I guess, that I've had in general is a common autistic experience actually is hallucinating, which is another reason that the bipolar diagnosis is often given, and especially auditory hallucinations, which I had just like a couple of times kind of, but also one thing that still continues to happen to me is I will literally hear music. I will think there is music playing in my house and then walk around and discover, nope, that is just in my head. And this is very common, but there are a bunch of when this was studied, a lot of autistic people also will sometimes feel like there's someone in the room with them or have these other experiences that most people would call, maybe would call paranormal experiences. I don't actually personally believe that that's what it is for me. That's not my experience, but I've had some really interesting experiences of just things happening or experiences that I'm having that are obviously not real. And I think of it as, in my case, as a very overactive imagination, a very strong ability to sort of create in my mind. And then also this sensory, hyperdrive or hypersensitivity of just taking in more information. Another theory about autism being that we are actually taking in more data than most people, which is why we are very pattern seeking and find patterns in things that other people don't, which has been annoying for me as a composer because I'll have teachers being like, why do you have 14 ideas in this 3-minute piece? And I'm like, to me, this is a very obvious progression. I'm like working with this. This feels very connected to me. And so it's been interesting kind of as an artist, just deciding sometimes I'm going to lean into this and just make art that my brain finds interesting. And then sometimes if it's for a commission or something, I need to simplify and make it something that is singable by a choir.
This is fascinating. It's blowing my mind open, not just on myself, but on some other people as well. But I'm not so concerned with the other people right now, but I love them. Because I've considered something spectrumy for me, but I think I might have remnants of the image also in my mind, right? Some internalized photocopy of like the classic autism image. And so there's a part of me that also is like, how is this person actually, like, what am I missing, right? Between like what I'm getting from you and what the picture in my, that's how I'm becoming cognizant of the presence of this picture, because I haven't thought about it a whole lot. I'm like, you're right, there is a part of me that holds that kind of image. And then another part of me that's experiencing you right now. And another part that's looking at me and being like, wait a sec, I see some patterns like in between this somewhere, and again,
Yeah.
not
And,
that,
yeah,
yeah.
I'm not out here trying to, diagnose or get everybody to
Oh, no.
self-diagnose themselves or
Oh,
anything,
no.
but
I'm just curious. I don't, yeah,
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 it's a,
yeah.
but it's a very, the images that are out there about autism are largely either that stereotype that you probably have in mind,
Mhm.
and also people, don't get enough support that have a lot of needs and need a lot of support. So there's both, that end where people just aren't getting the support that they need, and then also I think, you know, often people like me who do okay in school just don't ever end up getting diagnosed. And then they
Mhm.
come to me as a coaching client now and they're like, oh yeah, I've never really like even thought about trying to get diagnosed, but I, can't get things done. And I have all this anxiety and I don't understand why. And I get really overwhelmed when I'm in a group setting and there's just noise happening or somebody's eating a cracker and I feel like I'm going to scream at them. And like, there's these experiences where I'm just like, sounds classic. I'm not diagnosing you, but like, I can help at least. Like, let's do these things. Yeah.
How did, how did the diagnosis change your life? Like at that moment, what happened?
Mm. It's interesting because going in, I had told myself that I wasn't going to let it affect me too much. I'd kind of said, first of all, I'm very sure at this point. At that point, I felt I had done enough research. I knew there was a chance I wouldn't get the diagnosis due to, and I don't even like this term, but being seen as quote high functioning, being seen as someone who was doing okay and my life is okay. Although I will say, so I actually had done testing in 2015, I think, for ADHD and was like right on the line for getting a diagnosis, but didn't get it because they basically were like, you're too smart. And I was like, I hate you, but that's not. But the reason I had gone in and done that testing is because I was not okay. And I was very annoyed that I kept having, practitioners who would essentially say to me, like, oh, you seem like you're fine. And I'm like, I'm not buying groceries. Like, I'm not taking care of myself. I'm not doing, like, if I'm not dating somebody who's feeding me, I'm not eating. So no, I'm not okay, and I was just, I felt like people weren't taking me seriously, which is, another, I think, very common experience when, and I'm absolutely not telling people don't get help, but it can be very
Mhm.
hard to get help when you go and you
Mhm.
try and you're having experiences with, practitioners who are basically saying like, you're like mostly okay. Or same thing, I also have a hypermobility disorder, which is extremely commonly comorbid with autism as well. And basically going into a specialist for that and kind of being told like, yeah, well, you'll probably just have pain forever, but that's just like there's nothing to really be done. And that might be true, but it felt very dismissive. And so if you've
Mm.
ever had that experience, I think, with a professional, it's really like, I don't know, it sucks to go in and say, I need help and have somebody be like, but do you? You seem
Yeah.
okay. And you're like, it was so hard for me to make this appointment. I would not be here if I didn't need it.
Yeah. 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 Good help is hard to get.
Yeah.
Good help is hard to get. A good diagnostician, a compassionate listener, right? Someone who's precise in their thinking, can find the patterns. The pattern seeking is like, I think it's such an amazing gift. I'm such a big
Mhm.
fan of it in anybody, right? And musicians, drummers, bass players, they're all my favorite people, are pattern seeking machines,
Yeah.
right? And then pattern breaking machines also, because like our
Yeah.
attention will shift or right, some other thing will catch our eye. So we can break and then we can get very intense and then we can break again.
Yeah.
We learn very fast. I don't know if learning is like that for you.
Yeah. When I'm getting it, like when I'm hooked in and like in
Yes.
flow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And otherwise I'm just like, I literally don't understand the question. It's a
Mm.
very, that learning feels very binary for me in that sense that I'm either like just stuck on a basic scaffolding piece where I'm just not understanding even what we're trying to get at, or I'm just like, okay, let's do this double time. Just feed
Uh-huh.
it to me. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So let me ask you this. What does this conversation feel like for you? How would you describe this conversation?
Oh, wow. I don't know if anybody's ever asked me that during a conversation. um, I would say comfortable. And yeah, I mean, I just said flow, but kind of like flowy. It feels very natural. Yeah.
And are you cognizant of how you make that determination? Like, do you have
Oh yeah,
body
my
cues or
metacognition is ridiculous. I'm always thinking about how I'm thinking.
so it's like a part of you that's kind of hovering on top and watching your
Mm,
thoughts? Are you watching thoughts more than
mhm.
I don't know, more than anything, but
Oh
like
yeah. So
there's
another
sensation or Mhm.
very common autism thing is low interoception, the feelings inside your body, like literally not being able to feel what's happening inside your body. I didn't experience hunger for like a decade, probably. Basically had no sensations of hunger ever. And so I would only eat if I would like remember that eating was a thing
Oh,
most of the time. And actually, one of the pieces of that, I don't think it's just that that's naturally the case. I think it's also that because we're taking in more sensory information, it's overload. It's like too much information, it's uncomfortable. And so there's a very common pattern of dissociation from the body as well. And that for
this is
me, getting back into the body was a horrific process. I absolutely hated it. It was so bad. But I knew I needed to do it because I had a lot of pain. And I knew that I was having pain because I wasn't listening to signals early enough. And especially with the hypermobility, like I would sprain myself before I would notice I was uncomfortable. So I was literally just injuring myself all the time because I wasn't paying attention to the little, oh, whoops, I shouldn't squeeze that thing too hard. Or like, oh, nope, I can't. I like need a different shoe or like need to walk differently or something. Yeah.
Mhm.
So now I have a lot more body awareness. And I actually, part of the reason I do so many somatic practices with people is because I found them so helpful. So
Mhm.
I did a lot of things to get into my body so that, and actually what people call intuition is usually body sensations, right? It's the information coming up out of your body in the form of something you can actually access, but it's
Mhm.
usually kind of a maybe gestalt type thing, an idea that you're just like, oh, I just have this idea. Well, that's actually coming from, millions of bits of information probably
Mhm.
that are being,
Mhm.
pieced together by some part of you. And so now I have this like very loud, screamy intuition that I find very annoying because I've accessed this data and I still have the strong metacognition. So now what I experience is when I try to make myself do something I don't want to do, I am hearing an actual screaming voice about 6 inches away from my right ear, just starting to shout louder and louder, don't do it, don't do it. I feel like I physically can't do things that some part of me doesn't want me to do, that I feel very strongly. Um, and simultaneously, now that started to turn into the more positive as well, that when I'm trying to avoid doing something that I feel like I need to do, I get this strong, like almost like I'm being pulled toward it. And I personally find this very annoying. I'm sure it's probably good for me or something, but it makes it very, and I also can get just like very quick migraines if I try to make myself do something I don't want to do. So if I ignore the voice, I get a migraine like minutes later. It's like, oh, you don't want to listen to me? I'm like being smacked in the head by myself. So anyway, I find all this very irritating, but it has helped me build a life that I like.
This all makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. I practice a model called internal family systems. I don't know if
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
familiar
yeah.
with
Love, yeah.
IFS.
Yep,
This is
yep.
all, and I'm always in these like intense containers learning something or the other. And we had a full day, a couple months ago maybe, a full day on pain through IFS and trauma through an IFS lens. And the pain one was fascinating. Migraines came up. And we talk, I mean, the presence of the parts and the voices and all is like
Mm-hmm,
100%, at least the way I do it a lot in fantasy and
mm-hmm.
like what, or sensory fantasy. So what can you see? What might you hear? What's the shape of the right? What happens when you talk to the loud voice? Like, can you, will it allow you to even see it? What is, how close is it to you? Will it give you, is it willing to give you space, for example? Right? Like you can have these whole relationships. I don't know if you
Mm-hmm.
have you worked in this model before?
So I did not know that neurotypical people consider themselves to be one person until a couple of years ago. I didn't even know that people didn't experience themselves as multiple distinct people, not in a split sort of,
Yeah.
personality sort of
Mhm.
way, but just like, yeah, absolutely. I'm aware that there are multiple parts. And I've always known that.
Mhm.
I've always been aware of that and
Mhm.
had that experience. And so when I learned about IFS, I was just like, oh, of course, that
Mhm.
totally makes
Mhm.
sense.
It totally makes sense,
Yeah.
right away, right? So same. As soon as it, because I experienced it before I knew what it was. I did
Mhm.
a thing where I talked to this, like I had this rage dragon part, and but kept when I got overwhelmed and overloaded, and I had a life that I'd set up intuitively for myself that really worked for me. Like I lived alone and I had my dog with me, and we went to the beach every day and we walked, and I had ocean, and then I had friends, but then it was back home, and there was like some routine and a lot of freedom and like kind of this feelings of safety, and it was quiet, and I don't like things on the wall. I don't like noisy homes. So I live in like almost like no very little furniture, very little stuff. I mean, if I have stuff, it'd be like sparkly and shiny and weird, but um a low stuff and local like collections of things create noise in my mind, and I don't know how to explain to people.
I'm also an aggressive minimalist. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've probably the most stuff I've ever had right now, and it's still less than most people.
I have extra stuff. I have extra room in this tiny house. Everyone who walks in here is like, this is a mini apartment. All the kids are like, this place is tiny. I have a 7-year-old child, so there's lots of, well, kids come. There's a big backyard and a porch, so it's fine. And then in the winter, people can leave me alone for the most part, which is great. Also, I like to be alone a lot. Um, but I didn't know how to explain to people that the clutter, this is not like a boho style trend thing or anything. I was like, I literally get anxious. My body gets anxious and my mind is like flooded with noise. It's like an actual
Yes.
noise. I hear, and I've learned to tolerate a great deal of it because I live here now and the way I live and like whatever, because I live alone, and it bothers me sometimes. I'm like, I'm just like, there's like a base radio frequency that's just kind of on all the time that part of me wishes would just like, it just disappear and be like in a white or, like a glowing cocoon, right? Just warm and glowing like an
Yeah.
egg, the inside of an egg,
The first time
plain.
I realized that this was a thing for me as well, was the one time I went to orchestra camp as a kid as a violinist. And I got into my little dorm space, which was a college dorm space. And so I had like a dresser, and I immediately went and I unpacked my suitcase that I had brought with me, put everything in the drawers, and I just looked at it and I was like, I could live like this. I'm like looking around at everything. There was like nothing else in the room, right? And I was just like, this is amazing. I don't want any stuff. But having a bunch of younger siblings and, just constant hand-me-down stuff, having too much stuff that didn't really work, like having
Mm-hmm.
five different pairs of scissors, none of which really cut anything, that kind of
Drives me. I'm like getting creepy
exactly.
crawlies,
So
creepy
like
crawl. I just one good thing. You need one
yeah,
good thing. This is, I'm
100%
sure,
agree.
I'm sure you
100%
coach
agree.
like this too. I'm like obsessive as a coach on this. I'm like, I just want to give you one fucking good idea that will blow everything else open. And
Yeah.
I will obsessively think about it and keep peeling and keep peeling. Like I won't leave the thought. I'm like a
Yeah.
dog, right? Like a bulldog. I'll like hold that thought, right? And I'm like a crazy, but at this point, if you saw me in the middle of the day, like no one should have a show called Living with Raina. Maybe I'll make it. Where I'm just like this, and just circling the dining table round and round and round and round, and like just thinking. And then I'll have
I love thinking.
a moment
Yeah.
of it. I know people talk about like don't think so much and like oh overthinking. I was like, but I like it and I'm good
Mhm.
at it. And it actually is helpful in many cases. And now that I learn how to live with it, I also know how to handle the noise inside and how to harmonize with it, as it were, to continue the
Mm.
musical metaphor. I
Mhm.
have been taking these baths. I won't get into the details of it, but you may have seen the post from the group. But I take these orgasmic ritual baths, let's just call them, with the disco light and transcendental music and candles and flowers and glowing things. Um, and the thing I realize I like most about it is the sensation of being held. I don't get held in any regular way in my life, like physically or otherwise. I'm doing a lot of the holding. And I'm like, okay, I don't have that presence in my life. And I don't know if I want it in the form of a person 24/7. Actually, I know I don't want that. The thought is like already makes me kind of edgy. But the water can hold me, sky can hold me, beach can hold me very well. Cold and like alone can hold me very well. Like big trees in the snow is really nice. But this is like being in the bath and then putting my head under the water while the tub is running creates a certain kind of deafening sound. Like your ears are blocked, and in the background you can hear the roar of the water from the faucet dripping into this pool. It's very pleasant as a sound. I don't know if you can imagine that, but it's like part deafening and part like muted. It's like muted and deafening at the same time, which makes no sense.
No, totally. And actually that's, I mean, personally, my favorite thing about being autistic is how easy it is to make my brain happy. Like it is so easy to create a sensory experience where I am getting an overwhelming amount of pleasure very quickly. For example, spinning. I will spin in my chair sometimes until I almost throw up. I hate like roller coasters or, you know, that whole experience, but I love the like the physical intensity. To get back to that, you said, you know, intensity, right, in different ways. But like I can literally just by like tilting my head so my inner ear is getting more involved and just spinning around, create this physical experience that just gives me a ton of pleasure, a ton of intensity. It takes like 30 seconds. And I suppose in theory, I actually have been meditating every day for a long time, but like in theory, I think a lot of what people are going for with meditation and some other practices is like, if I do this enough, eventually I'll get a lot of something out of it, right? I'll get some pleasure or something will happen that will make me feel better. And I'm like, no, I get everything I need by just tilting my head at a 45-degree angle and spinning.
I love that this
great.
is coming up. And no, I love that this is, I'm finding myself talking a lot about meditation with people unintentionally. And so this is great because yesterday's conversation or the one I did recently was also about like meditation not being sitting on a cushion with your legs crossed and eyes closed and trying to clear your mind of all the thoughts. There's like all these ideas of what it is supposed to be, and this is more in like should land. And since we exist outside of should land or on our way continuously outside of should land, because it's a never-ending journey outside should land, there are other ways to reach. It's not even a reaching. It's like I recognize the meditative state, and there's many ways I can induce the meditative state to a point at which lately I've been realizing I think I'm in like a almost mildly psychedelic state of mind. Naturally, I can induce this, like it's a self-induced with almost nothing. I smoke
you can
ganja.
do it with breath work.
I smoke ganja like this much. It's like a pinch in the like most like blind, just like, you know, not blind, but like unaware stoners watching, I don't know, SpongeBob SquarePants and eating potato chips on the sofa. Like, talk about classic images, right? Of stoners. This is one of them. I'm like, you know, not all people who have this relationship with marijuana are like that. I have a very secret relationship with this. And also mischievous and fun, like totally like party. I like to party with it. But not that much, actually. Most of my partying involves me going round and round in a circle. As does yours, it seems. Themes.
That's just one of the things. But yeah, and actually that's one of the things I love to do when I have autistic clients, is actually helping them figure out what stims work for them for like different situations.
Did you say stims?
Yeah, like stimming. Yeah.
What's like stimulation? Is that from stimulation?
Yeah.
Stimming?
So stimming, if you see autistic people shaking their hands or like rubbing things, or I mean, ADHD people do it as well, you know, like fidget toys is stimming, anything like that. And so is spinning. You know, anything that's giving you a large amount of stimulation, and it's usually a repetitive activity. And it's one of the things that if you were diagnosed as a kid, or even if you weren't, if you were stimming as a kid in the 80s and 90s, you were mostly told to stop. And there was this horrible, horrible practice taught called quiet hands, which is like sitting with your hands not moving. And it is terrible for autistic people. It makes it very hard to focus. All you're thinking about is this desire to move. Basically, it's like your whole body just has this like this spinning desire to move. And if you can't do it, it can become self-destructive. It can become depression and anxiety. So it's very, very common, you know, for autistic people who are not diagnosed to experience a lot of depression and anxiety because they're not letting out. So one of mine actually is vocal stimming, which is so making noises, but also specifically, I have to exert a great deal of energy to not repeat every animal noise that I hear. So every noise that I hear a bird make, I want to just immediately do it back. And I do to a large degree when I'm like in a safe space. And I can do I've learned a lot of bird calls and all this stuff. But also like, you know, you can't always do that all of the time, right? And so a lot of people have learned to just like tamp down their stimming. And this I actually feel is applicable to everyone, honestly. Like this is not just autistic people. I think we all have urges that come up, and we are very used to either denying those urges or channeling them into one of the few things that we've been told are acceptable ways to spend urges or use that energy. And to me, one of the ways those urges come up is around creativity and wanting to create and make art and, you know, all this stuff. So when I'm just ignoring that and not letting that stuff come out, I am way less creative and I'm much more unhappy. So I love helping people just, you know, instead of, oh, I have to sit in a Zoom meeting and so there's nothing I can do. Well, what can we have you do to stim that's under the screen that nobody can see? You know, what can we do that like feels really good? That's maybe actually very intense. Like I have a client who was worried that taking super, super cold showers like counted as self-harm because they were like, it's not hurting me, but it just sounds weird, right? And I'm like, okay, but your body is seeking intensity, and after you do it, you feel good. And I was like, to take it a step further, if you know you have to be in a meeting that you don't want to be in, can you have just like a little bucket of ice water next to your desk that you can stick your foot in during the meeting? I'm like, not only is this not self-harm, I want you to do it more.
That's great. I am all for that. I am all for all these things.
Because if it works for you, why not do it? Like, be a little weirder and let yourself be who you are. That's to me, when people say be who you are, it's to me, that's literally just make more bird noises.
That's make more bird noises. You got to make a shirt like yours right now, but that says make more bird noises. Oh my God. I feel like I want to send you I don't know, a mug or something with that on it. I'll send you a shell. I've been doing these little shells. Like my friend lives on the beach in Nahant, which is, are you familiar with yeah, you went to conservatory here, right? In Boston.
Yep.
Anyway, so I go to Nahant a lot, and there are so many shells on the beach, and he's an artist and he collects them and cleans them and like preps them. We do art things in the back with kids often. And then I realized like this is like canvas, because they've done crayon stuff and wax stuff on it. And it's just like a nice, because they're big shells are like bigger than my hand sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Right. So they're really large and they're white, like a big swath of shell. So I've been using them as little quick canvases, and I'm a lazy artist. So not lazy, but I'm like, I guess it's kind of punk. Like Sharpies and a pen, a shell from the beach, and 2 colors, and that's it. Like, what can you do with this? I like the challenge, like that holds me in that. And then I could be really creative. Like I like an empty fridge. I like a bare pantry. Like, what can I make from this? And then you've got like 15 minutes. It's like that again, it's like a little bit of a pressure challenge. And then all my creative energy can get focused into this one place instead of in a million different directions, taking care of a million different things. I don't like being responsible for a lot of stuff. So I understand what you mean with the stimulation. And I think this to me also is how I understand, I'm on the edge of it, but like the BDSM world where there's like intense stimulation, they tend to be a lot of folks with a variety of neuro plus presentations.
Yes.
Intense stimulation at a point, for example, of a particular texture or intensity or temperature or all of the above.
Yeah. And actually, I do kink as well. And one of the reasons that I like it, I actually had a really great, I guess, scene with somebody recently who's autistic, and we were just talking about how much we loved that we could, plan it out ahead of time, do exactly what we said we were going to do in the order we said we were going to do it, and then be done. And not have the other person be like, oh, now do you want to do this? Now do you want to do this? And I'm like, nope. Neither of us even asked. We did the thing. We said like, we're good, right? We did the thing. And we're like, yep, we're good. And then they went home and it was fucking great.
Wow. I kind of understand. I'm starting to understand. No, I've understood this part for some time. I think it was from a parallel parking experience where I realized I'm really good at parallel parking. I can do it backwards, on a hill, in the snow, stick shift, etc.
I thought this was a sexual metaphor, but it's not. You're being
it is actual parking, but it will come into the sexual in a second. I'm being literal for a second. And I can, between two cars with only as much space for the car. But then I had an incident where there was an empty street. There was no cars on it. And it took me, I don't know how many tries to get it exactly. And I kept getting out and there was nobody. It was like late at night, the street light was on. I remember the scene and there was like, I was just like frustrated with myself. I'm like, what is wrong with me? There's not another car over here. And like the front wheel is turned, the car is too far out. Now it's like up in the thing. I don't even know how many different parameters and, permutations you can have of a car on a giant street. But I did them all. And then I had this insight. I was like, I need boundaries for my creativity. And it actually makes it more enjoyable, more intense. And I get way more creative and the rush of the focus of the difficulty, like difficulty is thrilling.
It's also one of the triggers for flow. Is that like challenge skills ratio. So having it be enough of a challenge, but not so much that it's overwhelming, and that you have enough skill that you can kind of do it, but that it's still a little bit challenging.
Yes. Like we're writing. So I have this band and we're writing music and we're just working through our like creative process. I like to think about process a lot also. Like how are we making music? And from what place is the music coming? I'm very obsessive about like tending the place from which the music comes and not just the notes. Because I had piano lessons growing up, classical piano, but then I abandoned all of that. The kind of world of general classical and also reading music or playing anything close to that style has long since kind of left. But improv feels really good, and figuring out that sweet spot of where it doesn't feel totally untethered and I'm making like a million decisions and changing gear a lot and pressing a lot of buttons and remembering a lot of lyrics versus where it's like it's totally open and I have no idea what we're doing at all. And there's a nice flow in the like this sweet spot in the middle where you find like, and you can come in and out of it, and like doing that with other people, I can do this for hours. And I have people with which I can do it for hours. And it is honestly the most pleasurable thing I have ever experienced. I come away with full body shaking, like drenched throughout, drenched, not from sweat, but like drenched. It's very pleasurable. This is lately, it's been like this level pleasure.
That's awesome. So and that sounds like you're experiencing group flow, which is also a thing you can get into like with other people when you have that connection. That's amazing. And that's in music is probably my peak experiences in my life as well, are those group flow music experiences with other people. It is the best.
It's euphoric. It is straight up like I feel like it's a transcendental headspace where I leave my body and they have left their bodies and our collective body is just like dancing in between us. It's a very, when I say transcendental, I mean, you get that, right? It's like, it's beyond normal consciousness. It's an expanded state of mind.
Yeah. And it also releases like every good brain chemical at once, which is literally impossible to get in any other state outside of
Yeah.
that, because there's no combination of drugs you could take that would release that much of those brain chemicals without killing you.
This explains a lot. No, I've been thinking about this a lot. So thank you for sharing, like just validating. So I'm like, who do I talk to? This morning I woke up like, who do I talk to about the experiences I'm having right now? And they're happening through music and IFS because I'm doing both very heavily right now. And I do it on myself like all the time. And we're playing more shows out. So there's that rush of like, oh my God, we get into stage and get into this zone and are playing. Uh, it's people are having spiritual experiences from the music. Like people who've never, we played a show last weekend and this person came up and like, I didn't know who you guys were as a band when I walked in here. And I had such a deep spiritual experience. I'm never missing another show. I'm like, what? Who gets that? This is our third or fourth show ever that we've
Wow.
ever played.
That's amazing.
We have this, it's something special. It feels like a holy trinity. We're a trio, and I'm very protective of a trio also. There's like, I have lots of thoughts on like energetic balance between, like in that special trio space, like a, right? Playing in threes. It's very good. Three is a good number. I appreciate you sharing all this. I woke up this morning thinking, who do I talk to about what is happening? Who would understand what is happening? And here, like a freaking gift from the universe, Mattia the Amazing shows up.
I know a lot about a lot of things.
Same here. Same here. I'm like, I don't know. I hope I never have to write a resume again in my life, because the thought of putting on one page, double space, whatever the regulations are now anymore, I don't even know if anyone follows them. I'm like, I can't put me on a page. There is no way. So
I haven't written a complete, I haven't written a resume with everything on it since I was 25. I don't think. There's never been a time when everything was relevant and it made sense to even try to fit everything on one thing.
Yeah. I haven't handed out a resume in years. I mean, I'm going to be 45 next month, 2 months. And I'm like, I've been actively avoiding resumes. I'll do anything just to avoid having to deal with the resume. And I'm very good at them. At one point I was like, I could help people with resumes. Like it feels fun because I'm anal. I'm a good writer and I'm really anal about like presenting things.
I am sure you've had the same experience I've had, which is having trouble deciding what to do, or like doing too many things because of the thought, like I could do that. Or even, this is even worse, like I could do that better than that other person who I see doing that thing badly over there. When I realized just because I can do this well does not mean I should be doing it, or that I should be doing it professionally. And to use a very silly example, I used to make a lot of my own clothes. I learned how to sew as a kid. I was homeschooled and I was very bored. And I could make an outfit in the morning and wear it like during the day. So I made a lot of clothing and did, some tailoring and so forth for myself. And then I realized, oh my God, the number of hours I'm spending to make a shirt that costs like $20 is ridiculous. I'm spending so many hours to make something that somebody else can do. Or in music, right? Like I know how to do a lot of music production because musicians learn how to produce things themselves, and it's a skill set I developed. And then I realized I am so much better at composing. Like composing is an actual special skill of mine, and production is just a thing I can kind of passably do, kind of. And that, like, even though I love doing a ton of things and I don't want to specialize too much, even within these broad categories of things that I do, I'm like, it's just more enjoyable to do what I'm really good at and really go into mastery there, instead of just continuing to get a bunch of things up to like acceptable levels and doing, 50 things, literally. I mean, I have this continual problem that I can't remember all of my own projects at once. And I try to write everything down sometimes just to make sure that I know what I'm doing. And I never, ever get them all because I'm always doing too many projects. Or like if I try to, this sounds terrible, but like, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to try to remember all my clients' names right now. Just like, just to try to remember. I always forget somebody, and it's fine. Like that's just a facet of how my brain works. But also,
that's a good problem to have.
It's also because I'm trying to, like, I don't know, use my own brain for my own purposes as well, and not just for these external processes that have to do with other people. So when I try to
Mhm.
remember the commitments I've made or the things I've told people I will do, there's a reason I'm not trying to store all that in my head. I'm trying to keep my brain free for me
Mhm.
to think and enjoy
Mhm.
and have fun with and have
Yep.
other things like actually in my calendar. This is a tangent. I just feel like when you're good at a lot of things and when you have a lot of capacity and you like a lot of intensity, it is very easy to let other people eat up your time.
This has been the ongoing discussion of the last few hours, from last night to this morning, around like band stuff, but also around me stuff. I am putting on a workshop. I don't know if, yeah, this will be out today. So at the end of this month, I'm doing the booty call protocol,
Yes.
which is a boundaries and self-worth exploration of like, for people like me who say yes to everything, who's interested in everything and does everything to like max capacity. And I'll do the teachers like very quickly, and then I'm frustrated and disappointed and burned out and bored and like under, like all the things. So for people who
And it's
have a
not,
hard time saying no, like what do you even
yeah,
want? What do you want for yourself to define that? It doesn't have to be forever, but at least to have some boundaries and articulation around it. And then how do you maintain that sacred room or that sacred wish for yourself? How do you keep choosing the wish of you over all the things that are going to come biting at you, which have
yeah.
your whole life? And then we become these resentful, burned out, right? I don't know if I love the word people pleaser, but people understand it. Um, but it's more from frustration. Half of my people pleasing has not come from wanting to please the other person, but out of frustration. From like, I can see how much better this can be, how easily, like you just move this one thing over here, come on, it's like that.
Yeah. Just let me do that for you.
Yeah, yes, my whole life I did all my sister's projects in school. I would stay up in the middle of the night and then she would get frustrated, of course. So this is a friend called it non-consensual caretaking, and I'm gonna like freaking
Mm,
write that up. That is like my next today or tomorrow. I've been talking about it a bit, but people are like, what do you mean by this? And I was like, I have a thesis to write on
people also talk
this.
about that in the disability community as well. When people are
Ah,
providing caretaking, not what you're asking them for help with, but they
mhm,
think you actually, if you fix this other problem, your life would be better. So they try to fix that thing for you instead of
right.
providing the help you're actually asking for.
Right, which when we talk about tracing that thought back, where does it originate? Usually, often it ends up in some choice overwhelm, self-worth, self-esteem meeting, um, excessive validation from the outside. External validation is not a bad thing. None of these things are bad. I think when it gets
Right.
to the point of like, it's affecting your life in terrible ways and you're not sure what's going on, or you're like miserable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Compulsive, like if you're doing it compulsively against your wish,
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And it's normal. I think it's normal for there to be cycles, right? For there to be
Mhm, mhm,
cycles where
mhm,
you're doing more for other people than you would like,
mhm,
or you're
mhm,
busy or feeling a little bit out of control or whatever. But I think the thing that I am the most protective about in my life is my time because of what we're talking
mhm.
about. And also, oh, by the way, Booty Call Protocol is like one of the best workshop titles I've ever heard. I
Isn't
love
it
it so much.
so
It's so good.
good? Next month
And
is going to
yeah,
be
like
might delete later,
nice.
with
Oh,
like a
also
very
very
sexy
good.
picture and just like might delete later. But it's
Love
about
it.
doubt, self-doubt.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah, all this stuff. And all this stuff, like there's so many thoughts swirling around about this right now, but like that when people feel long term like they're out of control, like they don't have control over their life, whether it's from actual external things that they actually can't affect, which
Mhm,
is, a lot of the people that I am both in
mhm,
community with and work with have
mhm,
experienced that,
mhm,
systemic issues that they can't fix that are
mhm,
unfixable by individuals. And so there's that, but then also within that, like when people long term just feel like they don't have control over their life, their space, that just basic capacity to like live and take care of themselves and their loved ones. a lot of people are just there, just in this real survival mode. And especially right now, I feel like with emotionally, I just know a lot of people who have really hit a wall emotionally, like at this moment of the pandemic. Um,
Mm.
and it's very easy to, if you can afford it, buy another course or do another thing, or do
Mm.
something, when really I think what you're teaching and what you're going for is like, how can you make the space to actually maintain what you're building, not just keep building shit out and hope that this new
Mm-mm.
thing will fix it, but like, how can you build
Mhm.
that space and then maintain those boundaries that you've set?
Mhm.
Because if you can't or won't maintain your own boundaries, nobody else is going to do it for you. People will
Mhm.
keep giving you more to do and keep piling
Mhm.
more stuff on you until you make them stop, you know,
Mhm.
especially if you've been in a caretaker type role and people see you that
Mhm.
way.
Mhm. And it's hard. There's a lot of deep work in there, which is, all the feelings that come up then when you say no, when you say maybe later, when you say no, thank you, when you say stop that right now. Does that make you a bad person? Like all the other, like there's parts of us that can start flooding. And in an IFS perspective, there's usually some kind of like a part that has been squashed or exiled or removed. It's not, it experiences too much shame or abandonment or unworthiness, like at a very deep level. And it basically threatens to like flood and short circuit the system like forever. Death, essentially, like if you take it to the
Mhm.
extreme, it's like a feeling of death. So all the other things have to come and squash to take its place. All the instant hit things, like buy another thing, drink another thing, smoke another thing, sleep with another thing, whatever. It's all the outside things, right? And those hits never go away. They stop giving the adrenaline hit kind of lessens, the compulsion continues, and then the depression sets in. And, it's like this continual flow of kind of oceanic, I guess. And I'm just able to now work with these parts. Like it's not all of me that happens. Like you make space inside you. What it really is like an internal space making. It's like an
Mhm.
internal decluttering, space making, and organizing. It's like a KonMari process, but on the inside,
I love that.
right? It's like and it can be what it can have glitter and it can have sparkles and it can have fucking whatever, like the spray painted glow in the dark thing that I have here. Um, but it is mostly with my permission and consent. Like that's the part where I'm like, and I don't have to be rigid about it either. So there's a flex and flow in the boundaries. So it's a continual process of what feels good now. And I'm expanding very fast now internally. Like my mind is really exploding right now. And so I'm doing a lot of caretaking of like I'm feeling like explosive right now, but there's also stuff coming in and there's pressure that I feel. Right. So I'm in the bath a lot. The bath is very good, like nervous system kind of calming and like literally
Mhm.
waiting, like floating the body as much as I can in that little tub. My body in that tub, like there's issues. The half of it is cold and then it's all like, anyway, I fantasize about a full body tub where I can float in warm, like hot, stinging water actually.
If
Um,
you want to come to Philadelphia, we have a jacuzzi tub and it is amazing.
oh
I
my
use it all the
God.
time. It's also my cat's favorite source of water now, is like gently running water in the jacuzzi tub. I'm like, you're the bougiest cat ever.
That's hilarious. That's great. Well, listen, on the
Yeah.
topic of boundaries, let's wrap this because I could talk
Yeah.
to you forever, obviously. And I'm trying to be better about keeping time because I'm doing these appointments coming up, which are like 50-minute IFS sessions, which are great. I can do 30 minutes, but it's just juicy. It's like I love it so
Hmm.
much. And then we get caught in it, and then we're like,
Yep.
oh, I overdid that a bunch.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you my takeaway from this conversation is what you said about clearing out internal space. And then my response to that in my head was, I can still find intensity within that. I don't have to just get intensity from clutter and mess internally.
Mhm.
I can still curate that clean internal space, which I love, and having space for boredom and solitude and lots of alone time, which I also love, and still find intensity within that. And it doesn't have to just be from constantly bombarding myself with
Mm-mm.
information.
I feel like some part of me enjoys the intensity of the expansion, of the effort to create this big, like imagine a big sky with a big sea in front, right? Like that view is an intense view. Like that is an expansive intensity, right? This is a compressive intensity. That's one kind, which is also wonderful. It has certain like squeezes and hugs are like, right? Compressive intensity, anxiety blankets, cats, right? Like this, claws. But this is a different kind of expansive intensity that I find very breath-giving and life-giving. And we live in a very compressed time. So creating that inner space to me is like, I'm very protective of that. And anything that I start finding is like creeping up and poking that container, I'm now being more vigilant, like, no, thank you. Right? Like the voice you said, this one over here, the loud one in your mind that says, don't do it or whatever it is. Right? You can say, no, thank you. I need a little space. You can be there. Nobody has to leave. When you get good at making the space, there can be space for all the parts and they can all come forth, play, do whatever, get what they need, and then go.
Beautiful.
So
thank you.
Thank you, keeper of the space. I really appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Awesome. Bye.